welcome back to the book club. Today we're taking a look at The Simple Path to Wealth by J.L. Collins. So the bottom line is you definitely want to make your own choices, and the reason that we mention that is because throughout this book there are going to be a lot of options, and it's still important to listen to those and allow them to contribute to your wisdom and your knowledge, because smarter and richer people than both of us multiplied together have contributed to this book, so they probably know what they're talking about. And basically, you want to just be aware of the financial impact of those choices. So that's really what this video and this book is about. And you can become wealthy without micromanaging your wealth, your resources, your investments. But it does start with avoiding debt. The way you do that is by having a greater income than you're spending, and then investing the rest in stocks. So for your wealth building portfolio, you could very aggressively choose to have 100% stocks as you move more towards a wealth preservation portfolio. Or if you're looking to simply smooth the ride, you can combine stocks and bonds in various amounts, allocations, possibly with like a 75-25 allocation or ratio there. So additionally, you can't predict the market, so simply sit tight and don't panic sell. And when you can live on 4% of your investments a year, you're financially independent. So he does have a fun, unfamily-friendly term for what that's called. We're going to leave it out of this video for all intents and purposes, but let's just say it's freedom money. Anyway, because the market inevitably rises and it's your most powerful wealth building tool, you don't want to have to be selling things or worrying about too much of all that at the moment. So the way you avoid debt or get out of it, if you are struggling with that now, you want to rank by interest rate and pay the highest first. So here are lots of great bullet points. If you hadn't taken a look at those yet, simply get the book. Next little jump here. So I don't include a lot of statistics because the variables that are factored in are significant, and there are quite a few of them, not to mention that they change. But let's just look at this one here. So if you had 12,000 40 years ago, give or take, you might have about $1 million now. So that is something cool to look at for all intents and purposes. But if you obviously didn't do that 40 years ago, you can still start now. Anyway, opportunity cost is what you give up when you commit your money to something like a car over another thing like an investment. And investments, for the most part, Warren Buffett talks about owning the businesses he invests in. That's really what a stock is. We'll talk about stocks and bonds in a little bit as well. So the index, or VTSAX, which is VT-SAX is what I'm going to call it for the rest of this video, we'll talk a little bit more in depth about later. So another good detail about it, though, is its self-cleansing nature. The companies that dropping below market cap are simply replaced, and you will still own part of 3,700 or so companies. So another good quote, I try to include as many of these as possible that are either valuable or humorous. So those who would trade liberty for security deserve neither, and J.L. Collins' version of that is toughen up cupcake and cure your bad behavior. So whether that's simply spending more than you make to impress people you don't like while working a job you also loathe, or not, you simply need to get over your mental problems and move on with your life in order to build wealth. That's why, although everyone could retire a millionaire, everyone won't. So the next things, if we jump ahead a little bit, so keeping it simple and doing things yourself. We will talk a little bit again at the end about the investment advisors. Basically, you're not going to find a good one, both in morals and merits, and you shouldn't even try. So that's why I simply do it yourself. Safety is an illusion, and your stage isn't based on age, so it kind of depends what you are trying to do. Here it says, it's based on, so like your stage of wealth accumulation or wealth preservation. It is more important to consider when you are trying to retire, how much money you have, what other options you are looking for. So that's some of the stuff we've got going on here. So what you want to do is think about the long term, your bonds, stocks, cash, all of that. So cash is obviously for the routine expenses and emergencies. And now we're going to talk a little bit about what all of this stuff is. So the VBTLX, you might see a little bit in my notes there, is the Vanguard Total Bond Market Index Fund, and it is our deflation hedge to smooth out the ride. So the other option is the VTSAX, or Vanguard Total Stock Market Index Fund, and that's our inflation hedge. So basically, if you are worried about one or the other, you would prioritize the appropriate one in order to have basically the best bet at ultimately ending up with wealth. So if we jump ahead a little bit, so what we've got here is basically the understanding is that to buy the index is to accept the market's average return. And that doesn't just mean, hey, you're going to have an average amount of wealth, because a million is not average. That's why millionaires are few and far between, but you could be one. And I will be too. Remember me when you're famous. Anyway, the market's average actually means the combined performance of all the stocks in an index. So it's frequently misinterpreted. And over 15 to 30 years, the index will outperform 82 to even 99% of actively managed funds. So, in the simplest terms, when you buy stocks, you are buying a part ownership in a company, and when you buy bonds, you are simply loaning money to a company or government agency. And bonds are also rated from AAA to D, and you can have 3 different term bonds. The longest ones, of course, are being 12 plus years, are just called bonds. But there's bills and notes that are either 1 to 5 years or 6 to 12 respectively. So happy Easter, everyone, especially if my family is here watching this video this weekend. That's fantastic. The fun quote that I want to share with this, conveniently in this book, it says, "Put all your eggs in one basket and forget about it." So I was thrilled when I was reviewing this book, and I came across that because the timing couldn't be better. So I'm very excited. Additionally, we've got one example wealth preservation portfolio. Could be your 15% stock allocation, 75% stock allocation, 20% bonds. And then, of course, you still need some in cash because it needs to be readily available and in liquid form. I don't mean state of matter. So, next little jump ahead. So, as a rule, it's better to buy and sell in a tax-advantaged account to avoid creating taxable events. And J.L. Collins recommends this unless you happen to have capital losses in a given year, then it's best to take from your taxable accounts when possible. So if you don't have a lot of understanding of all that yet, possibly read some books on it just to increase your understanding. But for me, I think the general overview that I'm doing here will be sufficient because, of course, I did read the book, and anyone who's really serious about managing their money should read both this book and the Dave Ramsey book that I've previously reviewed in the book club a couple weeks ago. So, next one here, we're actually jumping way ahead, but basically international funds are redundant and they have diminishing returns. There's a couple of reasons why that is. You can certainly take my word for it because I'm just taking J.L. Collins' word for it. But the reason he doesn't really stress that is just because your regular funds, your VTSAX, already covers international companies. And so that would be really protecting you from any of the main risk factors that comes from just being involved in US-based stocks. So there's lots more risks involved with owning separate international stocks, and you could certainly mitigate those or whatnot if you choose to. But it is just simply more complicated and not something I would particularly choose to do because I am very much the kind that just likes to put all my eggs in one basket and forget about it. Happy Easter again. Anyway, if we take a look here again, the simple path to wealth gives the stamp of approval to target retirement funds, or TRFs. However, you do need to look at the fees because they are frequently simply more than other things. So another important detail, I don't know if I have the right page here, but the variations on funds, you have a few different kinds here. Yeah, I don't know what page it is, but you've got your Admiral shares up here, and they have basically the lowest cost, so the 0.05%, but the minimum investment is $10,000. So if you don't have that much presently, maybe you just take a look at the investor shares. It's got a 0.17%, which is more, but it's still better than some of the other options. So minimum investment there is $3,000. And then finally, you do have your exchange traded fund, and that's got the same rate as the Admiral shares, and you don't have to worry about a minimum investment, but you do want to only do that if you have access to free trading. There's also something called the institutional shares, but we're not really going to talk about that much in this particular instance. So if Vanguard isn't an option, just look for another low-cost index fund. But something to consider is Vanguard's unique nature, since it is client-owned and operated at cost. That allows basically the fees to be tremendously low and or non-existent. So next little bit here, your stocks and cash will go in the ordinary bucket because they can basically defer your tax obligation, which doesn't mean it's not disappearing, it's simply delaying the inevitable. And bonds will go in the tax advantaged bucket primarily, but you will also put some stocks there too as needed because anything will benefit from a tax advantaged bucket. So the other thing, of course, to consider is just simply how your tax bracket and investment horizon are the things you want to take into consideration when making your choices. So next, I do have an important page with lots of bullet points here and lots of information. So the withdrawal strategies to minimize taxes. One might be a Roth conversion ladder, where you're shifting the money tax-free over time from your traditional IRA to your Roth IRA. And here are some of the options, some websites here. So they're gocurrycracker.com/neverpaytaxesagain, or the GCC versus RMD. Then there's another one here. That URL is a lot longer, so I'm not going to read it, but just take a look here. Then there are a couple more URLs and just some important information there. So when you do get to this stage of basically having wealth and not knowing what to do with it, check out this book again, or go to those websites, assuming they are still around in a few decades. So next thing that I do want to take a look at is you can roll into an IRA when you leave your employer, your 401k that is. So there's a few situations in which you wouldn't do that, but basically you have more freedom and the options, more choices to, if you have the control of your money. So that would be my priority, and that's what he recommends as well. So there's something called a Thrift Savings Plan, or TSP, which is basically an improved 401k for federal employees. It's their retirement plan. And you can have, like it says here, the 75-25 balance with the C and S fund, or just hold entirely the C fund and call it a day. So always, again, the choice is yours. Make it a great day or not. All right. So the 3 types of IRA here. This is your individually based tax advantage buckets, it says. So deductible, non-deductible IRA, and then the Roth IRA. So I'm not going to go over every single one of these bullet points, so just pause the video and read them yourself if you are, again, so inclined. I do, of course, just recommend getting the book. That would be your best bet. So we are going to get to something that's called required minimum distribution. So when you do get to, if you possibly read the bullet points here, here's some more, just in case you care. But when you get to 70 years and or 70 and a half, basically you are going to be required to withdraw your money. So it's best to plan that ahead of time. Don't wait until you are, in fact, 70 and a half years old, and then basically getting bumped to the highest tax brackets, like it says here. You want to always, of course, be aware as you're approaching that deadline, basically because if you fail to take your full distribution, once you reach, like I said, age 70 and a half, from your IRAs, 401ks, 403bs, you'll be hit with a 50% penalty, which is not something you want to overlook. So something else cool about tax brackets here, you see, you're not actually going to be paying 28%, let's say, on your entire income if it exceeds $152,000. You're just paying it on the amount over that particular threshold. So I guess that is a common misunderstanding, and I must say I probably didn't know about it myself prior to reading this book. So next thing we're going to jump to, we're going to take a look at health savings accounts in contrast to particularly flexible spending accounts. So the biggest difference here is, of course, that when your flexible spending account year is over, you lose or forfeit any money that you sent its way in that particular year. But in the health savings account, you actually do not. And you don't actually have to use, because since you don't forfeit it, you don't have to use the money to pay your medical bills. So there's lots of benefits here. And when you do pay medical bills with it, you can take them out, especially once you reach the age of 65, without any taxes or withdrawal fees. So that's beneficial if you take a look right here at some of these bullet points. Lots and lots of bullet points that I'm not really going over in tremendous detail, just because it'll be a while before I really need to, and I'm not a frequent doctor visitor myself. So some case studies, if you are really interested in some of the numbers and some of the previous successes of this process, you can take a look here at the Smoother Path to Wealth on his website. And there are some other case studies. This particular one, there was a gentleman whose grandparents had actually funded him about $35,000, or it grew to that amount, and he didn't have any debt. He did have a really great income. So he was talking about a couple of things like dollar cost averaging. At the end of the day, he was advised against dollar cost averaging, and if I'm not talking about it here momentarily, I will talk about it shortly. Yes. So the next detail here, we're actually going to jump to investment advisors. So this is another fun quote. So investment advisors who put their, their clients' interests ahead of their own are rarer than baptized rattlesnakes. And beyond that, you'd need to find one who's actually good, which is harder than finding one that's morally good, you might say. So just do it yourself, like we pointed out earlier. The next thing, the 3 ways they're paid will be, of course, commissions, but they also might charge an hourly rate, or they might just charge what's called the, no, it's not called that, but assets under management model. So basically they're just charging fees. The reason you don't want to do this is because it's a huge drag on your portfolio, whether you are growing it or living off of it. That 1 to 2% actually drastically reduces, again, it's your opportunity cost, and you would be much better off simply learning how to manage your funds than trying to find someone else to do it for you. So like he points out here, here's again a couple of the other examples. They might be trying to use all 3 methods, and it's not for your benefit. So run as fast as you can in the opposite direction. So sure, you could learn to pick an advisor, or you could learn to pick your investments. But like he says here, obviously it is in your best interest with better results. It's easier and less expensive to just pick your investments. So now we are jumping back to the dollar cost averaging. Particularly the reason not to do it is just because you're betting that the market will go down after your investment. That would be the reason why you wouldn't invest your entire, let's say, $100,000 in one moment. You're just like, hey, if I invest it periodically over the next year, well, I can prevent a dramatic loss. So again, you're moving too close into the fear of market timing. And since you can't time the market, you don't know when it's going to fall. Basically, you're just betting against history and the statistics that show the market will always rise. So that's just why he suggests to put the money in and not worry about it, because you're losing the money that it could be earning while you delay investing it, and it's not doing anything else for you in the meantime. So this next one is very interesting. So basically, it's just saying that you are not as smart as you think you are. There is no free lunch as usual, but basically there is a really cool concept called this inverted pyramid here. And if you think you've found an investment advisor that really cares for you and can actually predict the stocks, chances are you're being conned presently. But the way they did this is they might end up with 15 or 16 people, but they started with 1,000, and they just sent out a bunch of different emails that basically half of them say one thing, half of them say another, and everyone who gets the correct email that predicted the stock result, they get the next email. So the inverted pyramid, I thought was very intriguing, and especially before you are aware of the trick, it does seem like pretty legit, but it's not. You should just have that gut feeling it's too good to be true, that you of all people got invited to join this investment advisor and are suddenly going to be able to predict the stocks and have the bragging rights and make so much more money than all your friends, assuming that they're doing any money making at all and not just living in debt and pretending they're not. So yeah, avoid that too, because it's too good to be true. Feel free to just read the book and see more about that. So again, this is a little ways off, but basically it's a generally accepted rule that you could spend about 4% of your nest egg, is a generally accepted term. Hey look, egg, happy Easter again. Haha, that's 3 times. Do I get a cookie? So the 4% rule here has been analyzed, and lots of statistics support it. There are a few cases that withdrawing 4% wouldn't work, but J.L. Collins does mention that you wouldn't simply just want to do a 4% annual withdrawal and forget about it, as much as he does advocate forgetting about things. This would not be the case. You want to do that. You don't want to do something like that in a vacuum. You want to be aware of market conditions, if it's rising or falling, if there's something else going on, and if the world is going into an apocalypse. So you just want to check into it, and maybe you don't even need your full 4%. Let's say if you had $1 million, 4% would be 40,000, but maybe you don't want to spend all of that. And since if you're under a certain age, you're not required to withdraw it, you might just keep the rest in your accounts so that it can continue earning money for you, continue doing the work. So let's take a look at the next page of notes here. What else do we have? We are almost done. So like the last book club video, we are still not a fan of social insecurity, and I'm skipping a whole bunch of tables here and stuff just because, again, there's so much data in them. It will take a while to analyze, so I'm not going to spend that time on the video today. So Social Security is likely to have extinguished or ran out of their nest egg in basically the next decade or so. So it's not going to do much for probably anyone watching this video. And if you are watching this video and you are like twice as old as me, thank you. I do appreciate your time, and feel free to share with me any wisdom that you've learned over the years. Additionally, for the rest of people that are my age or younger watching this video, you really can't count on Social Security. And if you are watching this video and or have read these books, basically, if we could have just used or continued using the money that we are required to contribute to Social Security, we could have invested and grown our wealth significantly more, because it has a high opportunity cost with diminishing returns. We are likely to possibly get something from Social Security, but it will just become less and less as time goes on. So again, historically, it was, again, not in really anyone's favor because the time you could access it was typically after the life expectancy. So that was deliberate. Imagine that. So we're going to move right along because, hey, if you get Social Security and it's helpful, that's just an added bonus, but I would not count on it. But in other news, if you do end up being a millionaire or even a billionaire, again, remember me when you're famous. I would appreciate that. Invite me over to your mansion and stuff, or not. That's okay too. But you can certainly set up a charitable fund. There's a couple of things that he does suggest, obviously besides vetting the charities that you want to fund or donate. But you also want to probably just pick one or two as opposed to giving numerous smaller contributions, unless you just want to be on tons of mailing lists. So there are some tax benefits to having a charitable fund, and you don't need to be a billionaire. You can fund one with just $25,000. So that is kind of cool. So he does actually have a specific path for his child, which is in her 20s as well, at least at the writing of this book, to my understanding. So one of the most important things that he says is avoid fiscally irresponsible people. And certainly don't marry one. So he's got lots of good stuff here. I would certainly take a moment to pause and review some of these bullet points as I go through them. But last but not least, if you didn't get the memo already from either of these book club videos, you should be saving and investing at least 50% of your income. And hey, if you do this for the next 10 years, you'll be well on your way to financial independence. So again, he's got lots more bullet points here and over here as well. So if you haven't grasped the concept, I don't think I particularly spelled it out for you. So what it means to have 4% that you're withdrawing, that just means that basically if you have 25 times your annual expenses in your nest egg or in your investments, then you of course are financially independent. So let's say you can live off of $20,000 a year. Well, you'd be financially independent with $500,000 invested. And that doesn't mean you need to start with $500,000. You just need to have your nest egg growing for 10 to 30 years, and it'll grow probably to $500,000 in less than that time, unless you don't really contribute or you make the mistakes trying to withdraw it and you get hit with lots of taxes and fees. Alrighty. So he does have a cool bit of some stories here at the end. I'm not going to go over that too much. So again, this has been my book club video on the simple path to wealth, your roadmap to financial independence and a rich free life by J.L. Collins. Thanks for tuning in. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe.